Very good evening, my dear friends. In today's session, we are going to deal with banking frauds and the remedies thereon. It's a very hot subject. And then the banking frauds happen to be a global phenomenon. So, friends, in fact, in the present century, this is becoming now, in fact, rather an order of the day. So obviously, we will have to look into these particular aspects as to what these frauds mean and then how they are to be tackled. So, in fact, banking frauds basically are to be taken as criminal acts, and then through various unlawful and illegal means to make money or assets from a bank through various means, these banking frauds have been committed. They're very heinous, then I can say robberies of the banks, as robberies are apparent to eye but banking frauds are not. So we have already seen several such examples. I don't have to name the persons, and then they're all in foreign countries. And then in this particular respect, we'll have to understand the incidents of frauds and forgeries in banking sector considerably increased because of various reasons. So the RBI monthly bulletin of August 2013 contained various details of national conference and financial fraud. And on behalf of the Reserve Bank of India, it was stated by the representatives in the particular national conference, quote and unquote, I will tell you, quote, "We all know that fraud, and more so the financial frauds, have been in existence for a very long time." This is what the Reserve Bank of India has said so. Some may be surprised, but it is interesting to note that Kautilya, in his famous treatise Arthashastra, penned down around 300 BC, a very graphic detail of what we, in modern times, term as fraud. Kautilya describes 40 ways of embezzlement, some of which are what is realized earlier is entered later on, what is realized later is entered earlier, what ought to be realized is not realized, what is hard to realize is shown as realized, what is collected is shown as not collected, what has been not collected is shown as collected, what is collected in part is entered as collected in full. What collected in full is entered as collected in part. What is collected is of one sort, while what is entered is of another sort. As you would all agree, some of the above actions continue to be the modus operandi adopted in many instances of financial fraud that have hit the headlines in recent times. This is what was stated by the Reserve Bank of India in the National Conference, unquote. So, the aforementioned bulletin further stated on 31st March 2013, the number of fraud cases detected by the Reserve Bank of India, an account has been given. They run into 1,69,190 number, involving an amount of 29,910.12 crores only, of course. The fraud cases detected in banks, NBFCs and other institutions are separately taken as 1,76,547, amounting to 31,401.01 crores. So what is the basic definition of fraud in this case? This is basically criminal in nature. So a bank fraud, that way you can define as a criminal act committed through various illegal means to get money or any property owned or held by a bank, or obtaining money from the depositors by fraudulent means, posing as a banker. Today, internet banking, these banking frauds in fact have been increased. So the banking frauds are criminal offences as enunciated in the Indian Penal Code 1860. It comes under cheating also. Apart from that, the provisions of the Indian Contract Act 1872 also can be invoked, involving fraud and forgery, but they are voidable but not void. There are both civil and criminal remedies available for this particular banking frauds, dear friends. And what are the different types of bank frauds? We will just analyze now. The banking frauds are multifarious. One is accounting frauds. This is called also bookkeeping frauds. In this type of fraud, the sales and income are overstated and the worth of the company's assets are inflated to get bank loans. Now, the second one is check kiting. It's called otherwise check kiting. I can correctly put it as check kiting. Check kiting is a type of fraud which is globally termed as the float, which means the money is temporarily counted twice. And this type of fraud serves an operational purpose in banking, as the paying banker and the collecting banker show the check amount as an asset. So, when intentionally the float is exploited, wherein the paying banker has no sufficient funds, then it will lead to committing a fraud. The third one is stolen checks. Here, the fraudsters would steal the checks of somebody and then may open the bank accounts under assumed names and deposit the checks. Then friends, the fourth one is forgery and alteration of checks, where the checks are forged with the signature of the depositors by obtaining the blank checks. Sometimes the checks are also printed and then forged. Alternatively, a clandestine material alteration also takes place. I will deal with that material alteration subsequently while dealing with NI soon. Then the fifth one is uninsured deposit banks, where all the deposits are not insured, even though it is partly for some amount only. In that event, a bank calling for public deposits may be uninsured and the deposits may be taken for a ride. You will have to be very careful over that, especially in the modern situation. Then the frauds relating to demand drafts also now is in vogue, where the bank staff could be involved. Here, the connived employee may remove a few DD leaves and issue them to as regular DDs, and they are drawn on so-and-so person, payable at a distant city, and it is subsequently encashed. Then friends, the seventh one is unauthorized trading. Here, the perpetrator of fraud engages in unauthorized trading to record the losses. Then the eighth one is loans obtained fraudulently. In this type, the borrower obtains a loan and then declares bankruptcy or vanishes with the money. The borrower may even be a non-existent entity also. That is quite possible. Now, the ninth one is fraudulent loan applications, where the borrowers furnish false information to hide a credit history filled with financial problems and unpaid loans to corporations using accounting fraud to overstate profits. Actually, today, now a lot of online loan because of COVID, and then the subsequent suicides of the borrowers threatened by the so-called financiers. Now, these are all the things we are supposed to understand. Then the forged or fraudulent documents, where the forged documents are often used to obtain loans, and then a document claiming that a sum of money has been borrowed as a loan withdrawn by an individual depositor or transferred or invested can therefore be valuable to someone who wishes to conceal the relevant details. Then friends, the 11th one is net transfer fraud. Here, with regard to international SWIFT interbank fund transfer system, they're tempting as targets as a transfer once made is difficult, impossible to reverse. And here the networks are used by banks to settle accounts with each other, rapid or overnight transfer of large amounts. While banks have put checks and balances, there is still risk that insiders may attempt to sabotage and use fraudulent or forged documents. So you'll have to be extremely careful over these things. Then the 12th one is the fraud in bill discounting. This is another type of fraud now very much about universally. In this type, the fraudster uses a company at his disposal to gain confidence with the bank by appearing as a genuine profitable customer, and to give the illusion of being a desired customer, the company regularly and repeatedly uses the bank to get payment from one or more of its customers. These payments are always made as the customers in question are part of the fraud, actively paying any and all bills raised by the bank. Only when the outstanding balance between the bank and the company is sufficiently large, the company takes the payment from the bank and the company and its customer disappear, leaving no one to pay the bills issued by the bank. This is another big fraud now. In fact, in accommodation bills also a lot of fraud can take place now. The banks are very careful now in entertaining accommodation bills. Now, frauds on debit cards and credit cards. Debit card and credit card frauds are very widespread as means of stealing from banks, merchants and clients. The 14th type of fraud is money laundering. The term money laundering is an age-old practice of fraud, and it indicates any scheme by which the true origin of funds is hidden or concealed. Money laundering is the process by which large amounts of illegally obtained money is given the face of having originated from a legitimate source. The last part is, dear friends, there are other areas of banking frauds which relate to counterfeiting of checks, bank drafts, travelers' checks, the LCs, and so on and so forth. So these are all multifarious issues of banking frauds. So I have discussed about the banking fraud in general, the meaning and the types. About 15 different modes which are normally used, I have discussed about. Then friends, in our next program, I will deal with the remedies which are civil and criminal and which legislations apply and how these remedies will have to be taken into account. These are all the things we are going to take care and study and then work out and implement as and when it is necessary. So thank you very much, my dear friends. We'll meet again soon on remedies for bank frauds. Good night. Goodbye. Thank you.